Fauci told us, wear masks. You can't keep the 14-day quarantine forever. That's why we have the pre-test program. Lots of partners. We're going to do a safe reopening of our economy with some surveillance testing. You're doing great.
Lieutenant Governor Josh Green still believes Hawaii is on the right path to reopening to trans-Pacific travel. The state's pre-travel testing program is scheduled to kick off in exactly 6 days.
Yeah, but some are worried that Hawaii is not prepared for a wave of new visitors. Joining us now live is Julie Gabat, a Sheraton Waikiki employee and union member of Unite Here Local 5. Julie, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
So we're less than a week away from the state's pre-travel testing program set to begin. What are some of the concerns of the union at this point?
Because when we go back to work, we want to make sure that we are all safe, both workers and the tourists. That's all our main concern.
And as far as keeping the workers safe, do you feel that there are enough protocols in place to do that when visitors come back to the islands?
That's why, for me, until now, we're not ready to go back to work because we have not heard anything from the company, like the exact date of reopening, and then we need this hotel to communicate more with us. Like, they have to let us know if there are any more guidelines or protocols, or we wanted to know if the work environment is ready to accept tourists.
So all of you workers still waiting for answers by the company. Tell us how that communication's been throughout this time, especially as you get closer.
Yeah, because at Sheraton Waikiki, we are still waiting for the updates when we are really going to go back to work, because until now, they never give us the exact date.
And so it seems that with travelers coming back so soon, it seems that workers are still a little bit on edge, right? Do you know of any workers that are just looking forward to getting back, ready to get back on the job?
For us, we need to get back to work, but we need to get it right the first time. Like, when hotels reopen, we want to be successful in one go so that we don't have to close again.
And so what would you like to see more of by the state in terms of reopening, in terms of making sure that visitors and travelers to the islands are safe and follow the rules? What more can be done?
I think we need to do this temperature check and 72 hours, what is that now? A test? Mm-hmm. Maybe swab test.
And
for 72 hours.
Do you believe that one test for incoming travelers is enough, or would you have liked to see a post-travel test be required?
I don't think so. And we heard that, I don't know if it's true, that they said that the tourists that are coming in here, that they will be tested in their area 72 hours before they will arrive. Is it true? I don't know. We heard that we will not get the correct result of their test, whether they're positive or negative.
Julie Gabat, an employee at Sheraton, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And you heard her opinion. Coming up, we'll hear from the organization in charge of the hotels themselves. The Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association will join us live right after these messages.
Welcome back. Well, we spoke to hotel industry employees about their thoughts on the state's plan to reopen, and now we're looking at the hotel's perspective.
Joining us live now, former Mayor Mufi Hannon, President and CEO for the Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for joining us. So we are talking about, we're less than a week away from the state's pre-travel testing program starting. So first off, our hotel is ready to welcome back visitors to the islands.
Well, we've had a number of hotels that have been operating. for all during this period here. But a good number of them have been closed, have been shuttered. So Julie works at the Sheraton Waikiki, and they've been closed for several months now. So there will be different timelines by which and dates by which all these hotels will open. Not all of them are going to open on October 15th. Some of them are going to open in November, some of them in December. And it all depends on their own particular circumstance. But they all have had safety protocols and hygiene that our association has put out that they are following. They also are free to add to those standards by virtue of the fact that every hotel, every property, every resort is different, and they can choose to utilize what some of the national organizations are doing. And our guidelines have been vetted and approved by the State Department of Health.
I'm sure you guys have polled or at least talked to many of these hotels, and you mentioned how there might be opening next month, December, whenever that is. Is there a percentage or an estimation of how many hotels could be reopened by the end of the year?
We don't know. Suffice it to say, there's about 200 or so hotels or properties that belong to our association. About half of them have opened and stayed open all the way through, and another half have been closed. And it varies because we are a statewide organization. So I would expect that as the weeks go by, as the months go by, as demand starts to demonstrate that they should open, because many of them have lost $1 million to $1.5 million to $2 million a month just staying closed. And then, of course, all the investment in PPE, in apps, in technology, all those things have to be accounted for, as well as reconfiguring each of the properties to take into account social distancing. And now that the state has new guidelines for all of us with respect to the 72-hour pre-testing, certainly the importance of the QR code now comes into play with people who test before they come here. They register also for that QR code, and that's going to determine whether they have to still quarantine or bypass quarantine.
You know, the reason why I ask about the hotels themselves is because of the workers. A lot of people still on unemployment. Who knows how many people will actually come back and have their jobs? And so that's what I'm really getting at here. Any indication of the percentage of workers who will eventually go back to work, whether it's by the end of the year, 6 months into next year, or will a...
Brenton, it's a very difficult question to answer because of the fact that every hotel and resort is different. We'd like to bring them all back, but that's just not going to be possible because, on the other hand, we have to balance it out with the fear some people have of, are we going to go back to 10 million visitors again? That's not going to happen. So we have to basically try to ratchet up that number. Lieutenant Governor Green thinks we're going to have 5,000 to 8,000 visitors a day, as opposed to we used to average 30 to 35,000 visitors a day. So it's just going to depend on the individual property whether demand dictates that they can open up and hire back as many people. We're well aware of the fact that people want to go to work, and that's why we want to be ready. Even if they open up for a few workers, a lot of workers, we want to make sure workers feel confident that they come back to work in a safe environment. We also want to make sure that travelers who come here are also going to feel that they're coming to a good place, because it's not going to be the Hawaii they're used to seeing. Attractions are still going to be closed. Not as many restaurants are going to be open. Not as many retail centers are going to be open. So it's going to be a very different kind of experience. But rest assured, when that demand starts ratcheting up, we want to hire everyone back.
And I'm not sure if you can answer this, but the hiring process of hiring people that were laid off, you know, workers that were there or furloughed, how are they going to go about hiring back the people that did have their jobs versus new people, completely new people being hired? Do you know?
Well, you know, they'll have their, for these hotels that haven't changed ownership, I think the goal is to try to bring everybody back. And it's good. Every hotel has their own human resources, policy and the like. But the government should not dictate, nor should any organization dictate to these individual businesses how many people they should hire, that they should hire 100% of them all back at once. The goal is to hire everyone back, but it just depends on their own situation. And I said staggering losses have been accumulated during this period, no different from a drive-in restaurant, a coffee shop operation, to a hotel, to a major retail center. It just depends on their financial situation. The good news of all of this is that the state is now prepared to open up a date that we had been hoping for a long time, because we've said the longer you delay, the more we're going to pay. And we're going to pay not just financially, but not being able to bring back our people as quickly as we would like to bring them back.
Well, some people, like you mentioned, they'll get their jobs back more anyway than currently after that date expected. What is the message to residents? I know the state, they've had a program where, they're trying to get people out of the tourism industry and retrain to other industries. What's the message for people? Should more people that are in the tourism industry be looking to do that, or should they wait?
Well, I think the message is this: unless the state and county can come up with an alternative industry or an alternative job quickly to put people back to work immediately in the short term, then point the way. But what we do know is many of those efforts have not been successful. So, we need to make sure that tourism is a different kind of industry. We do the tried and true as we've done in the past with sports tourism, film tourism. But at the same time, we look to see how we can take advantage of the fact that people who want to travel during this time need to understand that, it's all about understanding the culture, respecting the Aina, and in our particular case, respecting our environment. That's the kind of traveler that we want to come here. And so there'll be opportunities to expand it. We also know because security is at a premium, and technology, all those things will be able to perhaps bank on the fact that tourism will still draw them here, but diversify within that by drawing on that strength that Hawaii can be more than just a place of sand, sea, surf, and spirit of aloha, but you can have other types of industries grow within it. In the meantime, too, I understand we also have construction. We also have the military that's here. Those industries have kind of remained constantly in action as opposed to inaction during this period here. Government has a very difficult job trying to figure out how to put everybody back to work. But the longer they delay the number one industry from coming back, then all that does is prolong the challenges that we face. They're no longer getting the $600 a week from the federal government. That was cut off in early September. We've tried to maintain the health benefits of all the workers, even those who have been furloughed, during this period here. That has been very, very challenging, not just to business, but also to labor organizations that have to dip into their reserves. So it's time to get going in a safe, responsible manner and get this economy going. There is no local economy if we don't start opening up the doors for safe travel to Hawaii.
Mufi, I want to ask you one more thing before we let you go. Earlier in that response, you pointed to the state's programs, and you didn't point to anything in specific, but we were talking about that retraining program. Why, in your opinion, there's been a lot of CARES Act money pushed into different programs, but there's been criticism that a lot of these money are going there, they're not getting in the hands of people, these programs aren't working. You mentioned it. Why do you think that is? You're a former government leader, a former mayor. Why do you think this is?
Every local entity does things differently. To me, the biggest tragedy is if we don't use up all that CARES Act money by the end of the year, because we'll basically have to forfeit it. The second thing is that there are pressing needs out there that they can use that money for. And I think right now it should be safety and security, and two, making sure we can try to put people back to work. There's an idea, for example, to build upon the tourism industry by having people who work remotely. They're doing that in different places throughout the world. Perhaps they can come here, give them some incentives so that they can work here, help bolster the visitor industry in that side. Let's talk about resort bubbles, film bubbles, all these things here that can put people back to work is very, very important because we cannot continue to face what we're facing now. At one time, we had the lowest unemployment rate. in the country, and now we have one of the highest unemployment rates. And so we need to have our government leaders understand the importance of getting that money out the door. The state of Hawaii, the city and county of Honolulu have the lion's share of those monies there, and that has to get onto the hands of the people, especially those who are most vulnerable and need help at this time.
Mufi Hanneman, President and CEO of the Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association, we thank you so much for your time tonight.
Mahalo.
Well, students are getting ready to go back to school next week.
Coming up, the Kauai Complex Area Superintendent joins us live with how schools there are preparing for the upcoming second quarter.
Welcome back. The second quarter for Hawaii schools starts next week, and some students are going back to class.
Joining us live tonight is Paul Zina, Kauai Complex Area Superintendent. Paul?
Hi, thanks for having me on the show tonight.
Thanks so much for being here. So we're talking about some students going back to class next week. Overall, how are parents and students feeling at this time?
Well, Kauai is not that much different than the rest of the state. While our numbers in terms of pandemic are really good, we still have the same kinds of apprehensions that the families and the staff are feeling throughout all the schools. So we're really trying to keep our focus on health and safety.
Now, you're saying there's a divide in the community at how soon to come back.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say across the country, not just here in Kauai or around our state, but there are many, many different opinions about whether to come back and how much to come back and which models are best for the students at this time.
Is it school by school, area by area? What's the feeling like? Where do people stand if you had to draw the line?
Well, I think here in Kauai, the kinds of things I've been handling in my office at the complex area here for our schools has primarily been, we want to make sure that everybody's physically healthy and safe while we gradually phase some students back into more in-person learning. So we've had a really careful approach to doing that on Kauai schools, and we've worked very closely with our Department of Health and our local mayor, of course.
What are some of the concerns that you've been hearing from parents?
So they're really concerned about, of course, if their child goes to school, how will we make sure and keep them safe and healthy? What kinds of protective measures are we using? And what other types of protocols are the schools making sure are in place as the students and the staff come back to having a little bit larger gatherings in the school setting? So things that we're doing to try to mitigate some of that are not really a mystery. I think they're done successfully in many different communities around the country and around the state, and we're no different. So we do things like making sure we have PPE in place, like masks or shields, and we do a lot of frequent cleaning and sanitizing of different spaces, especially the commonly used ones. And then, of course, we want to have a really good plan just in case we ever come across a situation where we have to respond to a positive case in a school setting.
And then how about the teachers on the flip side? From what you've been hearing, are teachers feeling like they're ready to come back to in-class learning? I know earlier we have heard some concerns over the past couple of months. So overall, how are they feeling?
Well, I can't speak to all of their feelings, but I can say that I've seen some really outstanding teaching happening, especially with the learning curve that's been going on in the distance learning models that we've had to adopt since the end of last school year. So as teachers were able to prepare for this and do a lot of training, not to mention the 10 weeks of the first quarter, they've gotten very good at it. So their main concerns are not so much the teaching methods anymore as they are just the same as everyone else. They want to make sure that we have an appropriate amount of PPE in place, frequent cleaning and sanitization of the different school spaces is happening, and that we have a good plan just in case we ever come across a positive case. So we've been working very hard to make sure that the teachers are informed of these things.
Paul, what do parents and students need to know for the second quarter?
Well, in Kauai, as it is across most of the state, we are responding in a very unique way, and each complex area is doing the same. So at the leadership of the state superintendent, our deputy, our assistant superintendents, and our complex area superintendents, we've been crafting a way that each complex area can respond individually. So the main expectation for parents that I'd like to communicate is that it may look just a little different for each family, depending on each student's needs, because what we're doing is bringing back students to more in-person learning, especially here on Kauai, based on the most needy students first, or the most vulnerable students first. So we know we don't want to bring back too many too fast. That's been a hard lesson that some other communities have learned, and we'd hate to repeat something like that. So we want to come back in a very careful, phased-in way, a little bit of students at a time, and then as we prove with that, increasing any of the pandemic-related spread, we would bring back more and more students. So the idea would be, before the end of the school year, to have as many of the students back to in-person learning as possible, or allowable, of course, with federal and state health and safety guidance.
And you did mention just if something goes bad, there are plans in place. So can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. I'd like to keep it pretty simple when I'm sharing that. There are lots of details around how, we recognize a positive, whether it's a student or an employee, and we notify the right DOE officials as well as family and school community folks. More so, I think what people are really interested in is that when that case does get identified and we start with the communication process, what happens on the facility end? And so we have some very strict cleaning protocols in place for how we would go about all of the affected areas in a school, and followed up with school level disinfecting and sanitization.
All right, Paul Zina, representing Kauai for the Department of Education. Thank you for your time on this Aloha Friday.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks so much, and have a great weekend. Well, coming up on KITV 4 Island News tonight, a spike in domestic violence here in the islands.
The pandemic has put stress on families, and now that's translating into dangerous situations for survivors, according to the Domestic Violence Action Center. Tonight, the CEO tells KITV4's TJ Horgan its funding is in jeopardy despite the increase in activity.
Plus, there will be trick-or-treating on Kauai. We'll explain the guidelines put forth by Mayor Derek Kawakami. We'll have those stories and much more coming up on KITV4 Island News tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks for having us. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of happy kids on Kauai.
Aloha.